section 1.1, your notes today are going to be talking about signed number operations. So we're just going to focus on adding and subtracting positive and negative integers today. And this year, and for this section especially, I'm going to ask that you guys not use your calculator. And the reason for that is because the more challenging the problems get this year and as you go on, it's going to be a lot easier and more helpful to you when you are able to do these quick and you're able to do them without depending on your calculator. So I'm going to really challenge you this year to use the rules that I'm giving you to try these without your calculator. So here are the two rules that you're going to follow. The first one is when you're adding two numbers that have the exact same sign. So they're either both positive or both negative. The rule is that you can add those values together and you're going to take the sign that both the numbers have. So if they're both positive, your answer is going to be positive. And if they're both negative, then your answer is going to be negative. Okay, and we'll do some examples of that in a second. The second rule is when you're adding two numbers with different signs. So if I have one positive and one negative, I know it seems weird, but when you see that, you're actually going to subtract those values and you're going to take the sign of the bigger number. So if the bigger number is negative, your answer is going to be negative. If the bigger number is positive, then your answer is going to be positive. And that's when I say which team won. So if you think of your two numbers as teams and they're battling against each other, which one is stronger, you're going to take the sign of whichever team wins, whichever sign is bigger. And that's when you have different signs. So let's look at some of these examples here. So I see a -3 plus a -2. They have the exact same sign. So I'm going to use my first rule up here. I'm going to add them together. So I'd get 5. I'm going to take the sign that both the numbers have. So it's going to be a -5. All right? The next one, oops, I see different signs. So this means I'm going to subtract those two numbers. So 7 minus 2 is 5. And the bigger number, which team wins? Is it the negative team that wins or the positive team? The negative team is bigger, so my answer is going to be -5. Okay? I'd like you to try example 3. And let's talk through example 4 together because I have 3 integers here. So I have a -3. Let's start with just these first two numbers. -3 plus a -1, they have the same sign, so I'm going to add them together. 4, and since they're both negative, my answer is negative. And I'm going to bring down this +7. So now it's my other rule. Now I have different signs. So I'm going to subtract those two numbers and get 3, and then ask myself which team wins. Is it the negative team or the positive team? The positive team is bigger, so that's my final answer. Okay? All right, moving on to our second part of our learning target. This time we're going to have some subtraction problems. So subtraction is actually the same thing as adding the opposite. So subtraction is the same thing as adding the opposite. Now the reason we have this rule and the reason we're talking about adding the opposite is if you look down at the bottom here when you see two negatives, okay, that's when this rule is going to be really, really helpful. This rule is not helpful if you see something like you saw in 3rd grade, like 5 minus 4. 5 minus 4 you should be able to do in your head no problem. It's just 1, right? Adding the opposite is helpful when you see a smaller number minus a bigger number, or two negatives right here. I'm going to really suggest that you use this a lot this year, especially when we get into more challenging problems. So subtracting becomes challenging when you have these type of weird problems. So you're going to use this adding the opposite rule, and I'm going to refer to it all year as presto changeo. Presto changeo. Okay? And another, oops, change, can't spell. Presto changeo is also going to be known as your lifesaver. It's going to help you so much, I can't even tell you when we get to the end of the year stuff. So I would just use it whenever you see a subtraction problem with negatives, just automatically do Presto Changeo. Okay, so let me show you what Presto Changeo looks like. I'm going to do some of these with you. I'm going to have you guys do example 1. You should know how to do example 1. We don't really need Presto Changeo for that one. It's just a regular subtraction problem. This is where Presto Changeo might come in handy because they're flipped. I have a smaller number minus a bigger number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the opposite. So I'm going to change this subtraction problem to an addition problem and make this a negative. So if I were to rewrite this, I would really have 8 plus a negative 17. So I'm going to ask myself which team, or I'm going to subtract these two numbers, and I'm going to get 9. And I'm going to think, which team won? Is it the positive team or the negative team? So the negative team has a bigger number, so that means my answer is going to be negative. Alrighty, I'm going to have you guys try example 3 using Presto Changeo. Alright, let's go to example 4. Example 4, that's where I see my two negatives, and this is where my lifesaver, my Presto Changeo, is going to be very, very helpful. I'm going to change this to add the opposite. So really what I have is 3 plus 5. So now I can just add those up, and my answer is 8. Okay, I'm going to try one more with you. Again, I see minus a negative. Negative 7 minus a negative 10. Presto Changeo. If I wanted to rewrite this, I have negative 7 plus 10. Now, in its addition problem that I can follow my rules for, I have different signs, so I'm going to subtract them. So I get 3, and then I have the bigger number is positive, so my answer is positive. All right, go ahead and try example 6 on your own, and then you should be good with how to add and subtract integers.